Hi guys, thank you so much for connecting to this edition of Games Gamers Gaming. Thank you so much, guys. Once it's 6:15 p.m., we're going to be bringing up our guest. Our guest is Nick Murray, and he's going to be discussing with us. He's going to be joining us in the conversation on the battle between Apple and Epic Games. I'm sure a couple of you guys cannot wait to hear Nick's thoughts. Nick is one guy who has worked in some of the best gaming companies in the world. He currently heads Carry First as head of games, and I'm sure he also cannot wait to share his thoughts and insights about the battle between Apple and Epic Games, and of course how it affects us as Africans. So guys, thank you so much once again for connecting. Once it is 6:15 p.m., I'm going to bring Nick up. Thank you so much. Guys, for connecting again. We have Nick Murray on the background, and I cannot wait to join this session. Once again, my name is Bolu Omotayo, and I lead the community at Career First. And regularly, once every month, typically on a Friday, we hold conversations that are part of Games Gamers Gaming. And typically, what we talk about on Games Gamers Gaming is we talk about everything gaming as related or relative to the African context. Gaming, everything Africans need to know, what game creators need to know, essential conversations that needs to be had for the gaming industry in Africa to move forward. So on today's edition of Games Gamers Gaming, we have with me here Nick Murray, who is on the background and bringing it out shortly. Nick Murray is currently the head of games at Career First, and I'm sure he has a lot of interesting insights and interesting things to share with us as regards the battle between Apple and Epic Games. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining this call. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, hi everyone. Happy Friday. I hope your evening is starting well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think I would like us to start the conversation from Nick introducing himself. Nick, can you please tell us about what are the interesting things you've done? What are the things that we need to know about you?
Sure. So I've been working in games for around 11 years by now. I started out in the gaming industry doing actually mobile phone like game testing before kind of iOS and Android were really a thing. And even like testing Pro Evolution Soccer across 100 different devices and that kind of thing. Then I moved to Germany, where I'm currently based in Berlin. And since being here, I've worked on like PC MMORPGs. I moved to Sweden for a bit. I worked for Rovio on Angry Birds 2, Angry Birds Epic, amongst other things. I stayed in Sweden. I moved to Ubisoft in Malmö and was working on Tom Clancy's The Division. Then I moved back to Berlin and was working for GREE on kind of mid-core role-playing games, things like Knights and Dragons, Dragon Soul. And then since that time, I've mostly been doing consulting work, so helping companies to kind of understand their numbers, to help improve their KPIs, and just generally like deliver a better quality product. I've worked with companies like Rovio again, Nitro Games, Cherry Pit Games, to name a few. And since just a few months, I've been head of games for Career First. So getting to learn a bit more about the African market and trying to understand the opportunity and hopefully deliver some great products.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Nick. Guys, if you cannot see us clearly or if you cannot hear us clearly, you can try out other streaming platforms. This conversation is currently being streamed across YouTube, Facebook Live, and ensure you have full access to all the things that we are saying. So if you have issues with any of the streaming platforms, kindly switch ASAP. On Facebook, it is at Career First. On YouTube, it is at Career First. Yeah, Nick, thank you so much for that introduction. For those that did not hear, Nick just talked about how he's worked with some of the most awesome gaming companies in the world. Worked on Angry Birds 2, worked at Ubisoft, and some of these very amazing, cool gaming companies that we have here in Africa. Thank you so much, Nick. So my first question is now going directly to the conversation for the day. The conversation is talking about the battle between Apple and Epic Games, and essentially how this battle affects gamers in Africa. For those who don't know, Apple and Epic Games are currently on the battle, which essentially is Apple kicked Epic Games out of the iOS platform, which means that we can no longer access games like Fortnite on the App Store, and I think also on the Google Play Store. Fortnite has over 100 million players on the iOS platform, and you can see that there is a lot of frustration from gamers, a lot of frustration from Epic Games on their end, and of course, we need to have conversations about it. So my first question for Nick is very simple. Tim Sweeney tweeted, by the way, Tim Sweeney is the founder and CEO of Epic Games. He said Apple is the number three game company in the world by game revenue. He also said Apple doesn't make games, which is absolutely crazy. Now, revenue basically that Apple gets is for platform tax. So my first question for Nick is, do you think platform tax was strategically structured to keep companies under? Now, for those who don't understand what platform tax is, platform tax simply is the charge that platforms like Apple, which of course is the App Store or the Play Store, charges creators for distributing games through their platform. And Apple typically charges about 30%, which is crazy. And my question, like I said earlier, is do you think this is strategically structured to keep companies on? And if not, when is Apple agreeing to negotiate?
Sure. So firstly, I would say, yeah, you're right. Like, platform costs are typically around 30%, and this is for Apple and Google. Keep in mind that though everyone is talking about Epic versus Apple, because that gets more publicity, Epic also filed a similar lawsuit at the same time to Google. So they're actually suing both companies for the same thing. And I think before I answer your question, it's actually important to understand a bit more about on what grounds they're suing them. So in the US, there is a series of laws called antitrust laws. And a trust is basically a consolidation of companies. So, for example, like John D. Rockefeller was like one of the original like trust holders. He basically kind of jumped on the oil boom in the US and quickly made very good money at it, bought a lot of competitors, consolidated his market, and became the biggest player in that market, forcing everyone else to the side or just buying them out. He could fix prices, he could put people out of business. It was far too much power. So the antitrust laws are designed to stop companies from doing this. They're designed to stop companies from having a monopoly and having unfair control over the marketplace. And basically, they're designed to support competition. So competition is important as it means consumers have choice and companies are forced to be better. So if you have just one company in the marketplace, they can charge whatever they want for a product. If you have two, then they're going to end up competing on price, and that's going to benefit the consumer. So the success of this case, which we might come to a bit later as well, but it basically hinges on two concepts. One is proving that the market is like what the market is in this case. So is it apps on the iPhone, which Apple controls 100%, or is it the mobile market, of which Apple has somewhere between 15 and 30%? So that's like the first thing that they would need to justify. And depending on how that argument goes, then Apple might have to answer the second question, which is, have they used their influence to do something that is anti-consumer? Like, consumer welfare is actually basically since the 70s in the US one of the most important parts of antitrust. So those are the two main things that have to be answered, and Google will have to answer the same questions, and there will be some differences which we'll maybe get into later. But coming back to your question then, like, so Apple started out with this platform tax. I don't think it was particularly to keep companies under. I think it was because at the time it was something that actually they didn't really know how big mobile gaming was going to be. You have to keep in mind a lot of games before that were like console, like, you know, a boxed product, like something you'd have to go to a store and buy off the shelf. And that is a huge expense to get that box onto that shelf. So you have to pay for like creation of the disc, you have to pay for shipping it. Then you have to give a percentage to the retailer. So already, before you've sold your game, you've lost usually over 50% of its value. And then, you know, when like companies start moving digitally, and, you know, Steam as well, like everyone kind of seemed to settle around this like 30% rate. So it seems like a good deal when compared to what it could be if it was a physical product. And then like Apple basically and Google justify their cut by saying, well, you know, we curate the stores, we take care of what appears on there, we do all of like the kind of the necessary checks if it's, you know, if it meets our standards. And Apple is much stronger on this than Google. Google typically, like, the Play Store is a bit of a mess because they allow the vast majority of things on there and don't check everything as thoroughly, I would say, just because there are too many to be able to check. So I guess the question really is, like, does the 30% that Apple charge, like, does that justify kind of what they're doing? Like, can they justify that cost by hosting this store, by running everything? And I don't really know the answer to that. I don't know all of the things that they're doing on it. But my guess is, since mobile gaming has exploded since around, I would say, kind of 10-ish years, like yearly growth on growth is huge. So I think they are probably getting a hell of a lot more money than they need in order to run the stores effectively. And coming to the second part of your question, like, why aren't they agreeing on, like, why wouldn't they negotiate? The challenge there is that if they negotiate, then that means that anybody would be able to challenge them. So due to legal precedent in the US, like, if Epic Games win this, and then any old company could come along and say, well, I feel exactly the same, here is my case. And because there is a precedent set, you know, within the courts, that means that they have to keep using it. So unfortunately, it might lead to a bit of anarchy. It might lead to people, you know, deciding to create their own stores on Apple devices and that kind of thing. It might not be a bad thing because, again, coming back to the idea of antitrust, it might actually mean that, you know, the quality goes up and the costs for the consumer go down. But, you know, that remains to be seen. We don't know what the result is going to be.
Cool. Thank you so much for your response. So based on your response, it's safe to say that Epic Games fight is justifiable.
Yes, to some extent. Basically.
All right, cool. So now okay.
I can explain a bit more. So I think it's justifiable to a point. So they're right that 30% is a lot. And for some companies, not Epic, that could be the difference between the company staying alive or having to shut down. You know, that 30% of revenue could hire an additional employee also to make their games better. And then, you know, maybe by making their games better, they have more players and more people who want to spend on the game. And that's great. Like, we want to support gaming companies. But if you look at Epic's other main platforms, so I'm not even thinking about Sony and Microsoft because they're kind of... Paul, are you still there? I think you dropped out.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. So aside from Sony and Microsoft, like PC, so Epic Games, knowing that the PC is largely an open platform, have built their own game store. And they're doing very well out of it, and able to offer their products on there, and obviously then get the full amount of, you know, money that they deserve for selling the content. However, they are also functioning like Steam, where they are offering certain, like, other games from other publishers and other developers, and taking a cut of that. The fact is, they just take a slightly like lower cut compared to Steam. So if we look at that idea as like the template, then I would imagine that if at all possible, they would try and do something similar on iOS in order to make sure that they can still have their own products, but they would also then they would take a cut of other people's products as well, just a lower cut.
All right, cool. So for those who are just joining the conversation, we're talking about the current battle between Apple and Epic Games. And Nick has been, of course, sharing his thoughts and insights about the whole conversation. And of course, like Nick said, the battle that Epic Games has pulled is quite justifiable to some extent, like he said. But then this is my next question. Nick, are you there?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Still here.
So Apple said something. Apple said that. Well, before I say what Apple said, my next question is this: it is why did Epic Games decide to pick a fight at this time? And I'm asking this question based on what Apple said. So Apple said that Fortnite users has dropped about 70% in the past 1 year. Which means that, of course, I don't have insight or I don't know what their books look like because it's a private company, which means that their revenue definitely must have dropped. And definitely the money they are making has dropped. One of the things I know that companies do when their revenue drops is they look at two things. One, they look at increasing amount of users, paying users to, of course, make the money go up, or they also look at cutting costs. So one of the two ways companies ensure that their books are balanced. Now, I'm thinking that could it be because the only option Epic Games have right now is to cut costs, and the best cost that they see now is platform tax, which is 30%, which is absurd. Could that be that that's the reason why they are picking a fight now? That's my first question. And the second question is, if they were not experiencing that drop in amount of users, do you think they would have picked the fight?
So to answer your first question, no. To answer your second question, yes. So basically, I think that they started the fight not because of users dropping. So Fortnite is one of these games which, like, primarily it monetizes and is played on PC and console. Like, those are the optimal ways of playing the game. Mobile is not the optimal way of playing Fortnite. It's the way that, like, people often kind of use to supplement what they're already doing. So I can't bring my, I don't know, games console to school, so I play on my phone there. And if we think about the last year or so, I mean, the last 6 months, most schools have been closed. So, like, most people have been home with their consoles and with their, PCs or whatever, and have been able to play Fortnite from home, therefore not really needing to play on mobile at all. So I think that's part of the reason for the decrease in like active users. You make a good point about how, like, when a games company or when any company really is struggling or seemingly losing money, then you would look at, like, top line or bottom line. You'd look at revenue creation, or you'd look at cost saving. I don't think this is really the case for Epic right now, primarily because financially they are extremely stable. Their presence on PC is growing constantly. More gamers are, like, moving towards the Epic Store as a way of purchasing. Their console offering is still very good. Like, Fortnite is still, one of the, like, top games in the world. And, like, obviously when it was released, everybody knew about it. Like, most people were playing it. It was such a huge phenomenon. Like, financially, they're good. They don't need this. But I see it more as, like, something that is not even, like, pro-consumer, but more pro-developer. Think about, like, indie developers or just, small teams who maybe have a little bit of funding. Like, there is no way these companies can take on Apple and say, I think it's unfair you're charging 30%. They just have to accept it. And I think Epic is taking it upon themselves to say, actually, you know what? Like 30% is really high. Like try to reason with, try to be more reasonable. Like we're going to look out for you. And if you compare this to, for example, PC developers, so the Unreal Engine, which is like really versatile engine owned by Epic Games, you can use the Unreal Engine for free, and then you can publish your game. And as soon as your game starts actually achieving a certain level of success, only then will Epic charge you. And for me, this is just a continuation of that kind of very pro-developer stance of like, look, we want as many game creators as possible. Like everybody who is able to create games should be creating games because it makes the whole industry better. It makes us more diverse. It allows different voices to be heard. And the problem with the 30% charge means, like I said earlier, like that can force indies to shut down. Like for Epic, their margins will be fine. They can take the 30% hit, but for smaller developers, not so much. So I really think that he just wants to support developers. And I mean, he's a developer himself. Like as far as I know, started like a company and was like shipping games by hand from his parents' garage. So I think he understands the struggle of smaller developers and is just trying to help them not get bullied by what he sees as a monopoly.
Cool. So one interesting point you made was you don't think Epic Games have a money problem. You just think that they want to start the fight now and stuff. And my question is, because you also made a point where you said that maybe the reason why there's a drop in iOS users on the iPhone is typically because during the lockdown, everybody's practically with their PC or with their console. And since mobile was actually not optimal way for people to play Fortnite, people have resorted to playing on their PCs and consoles. So is it safe to say that Epic Games realizes that they don't have much to lose at the moment, typically because they don't have a lot of their consumers on that platform at this time, is the reason why they decided to start the fight at this time?
Exactly. So if they have relatively low user numbers right now, and it's not their primary platform, it's not where they generate most revenue, it's not where they have most players, like it just makes sense. And like there are very few companies that would ever be in this position. You would have to have as well a cross-platform game that spans across, all consoles and PC and mobile. And then based on that, you would have to have a mobile game that's maybe not doing as well, and then you would feel like, okay, maybe now is the time we could pull the trigger. But the set of circumstances is actually quite specific that's led them to this point. And you'll note that like when they started this fight, they basically had everything ready to go. Like they had their kind of anti-Apple propaganda video and everything.
They had a marketing campaign in place.
Exactly. So everything was just waiting for that right moment and then to pull the trigger, and start it. Yeah.
Cool. So my next question is, if Apple allows Epic Games launch their store on the iOS platforms, because I think that's like one of the arguments that the iPhones typically cannot allow you launch your own store. So the only means of distribution across the iOS platform is through the App Store. So, but we find that that's the opposite on the Android platform. On the Android platform, you can launch your own store. Like we have different stores that people practically distribute the apps through. But I also read somewhere where they said that because at the beginning, Fortnite was not on the Google Play Store. I don't know if I'm correct, but that's what I read somewhere. That at the beginning, Fortnite was on the Google Play Store, but at some point they had to come back and say, okay, let's put our game on the Play Store. And I typically want to think it's because they failed at whatever efforts they wanted to do anti-Google. Now, my next question is, if Apple allows companies like Epic to launch their own store on iOS, do you think they will be as successful or they will be more successful?
It's a really interesting question. So I think Like Epic themselves would probably be more successful because, like I said, I imagine that they would do it much like the PC Store, in which they would put forward other games and take a cut. And obviously it would be lower than the 30%. And obviously, again, their margins on things like Fortnite would also increase because they would handle the payments on their side and not have to rely on Apple. I don't know if like the overall system would be better. It's difficult to say. I think on each platform there's probably room for competition, but I don't know how much competition. If we think about iOS and Apple, like right now having just Apple is obviously not useful. Like it does feel like a monopoly. If there was like the App Store and the Epic Game Store as like two big ones, that could be more interesting. But there has to be a limit. Like you can't also have like 20 different game stores simultaneously, because then it's very easy for consumers to lose out. Like, so I don't know how many exactly would benefit consumers while still giving them good choices and while still giving them like good rates and making sure that the quality of the games is high, that the store is curated properly, and that people can get featuring or like get some publicity here and there. It's definitely more than 2, but it's probably less than 10. Again, just to compare to PC, I mean, on PC you've got a bunch of different stores, and they're all acting kind of independently for the most part, and it's something that does become awkward as a consumer. So I think Epic Store on iOS is a definite possibility, but I think they also have to earn it, because if this like antitrust lawsuit does succeed and the courts rule, okay, Apple is no longer allowed to hold a monopoly on this stuff, then there will be other stores cropping up, and it won't just be Epic. So Epic would have to start from zero and basically like justify the existence of their store in comparison to others. They would have to offer a better experience, better rates for developers than the other competition.
All right. So next question is, why did Epic Games fail at that strategy on the Android platform? Because typically, I think they went out to launch their own store on Android, but it failed. Why do you think they failed?
So I don't know exactly why they would fail on Android. I mean, I think it's probably just a matter of like discoverability, which again, like people, even though there are multiple stores on Android, most people don't use them. So even if there is no 100% monopoly, I think, still 99% of all apps that are downloaded on Android will come through the Play Store.
Play Store.
Yeah. So I think it's more just about discoverability, and trying to make sure that you can actually show off your games and show off like your store as well. And for consumers, I think it's also because a lot of people don't necessarily realize that much about how much platform costs are. So they don't really care where they get their game. They just want to make sure they get the game. And if they want to spend on it, they'll spend on it. But again, these things are independent of like location. If I want to play Fortnite and spend on it, I don't necessarily think about if I'm giving money to Sony or Microsoft or Apple or Google or whatever. I just think I just bought this unicorn costume or something like that. So I think it's mostly just because consumers aren't as engaged in this battle as developers. And this is why I also said earlier that I think if we think of why Epic is doing this, I think it's probably more from a pro-developer standpoint than a pro-consumer one. I think consumers will go kind of along with the crowd, and it's more about making sure that developers are taken care of.
Interesting. Thank you so much for those points that you raised. For those who are just joining the conversation, we have with me here Nick Murray. Nick Murray is the head of games at Carry First, and is sharing his thoughts about the battle between Apple and Epic Games. For those who don't know, there's a battle between between Apple and Epic Games, which simply is such that Apple kicked out Epic Games from the App Store because they violated certain rules like initiating their own or let me call it third-party payments, because of course the only payment that's supposed to be allowed on iOS is supposed to be Apple Pay, and because they violated things like that, they kicked out of the App Store. Then Epic Games in turn went to court to sue them for antitrust, and of course there's been a series of weeks of drama between these two giants, and that's the conversation we're currently having with Nick Murray. So Nick Murray, once again, thank you for joining us. My next question is, how does this battle actually affect African gamers? And the reason I'm asking this question is very simple. Typically, I do not think that a large percentage of the numbers that Fortnite has on iOS, I don't think a lot of them come from Africa, typically because we do not have the facility for them, for example, space on your device to be able to access these games, internet infrastructure, payments, which of course are critical challenges to gaming, and of course which these are some of the problems Carifest is solving. So from that perspective, we understand that I'm sure that we don't have a lot of Fortnite users from the African continent, but I know we would have a few of them from Africa, and these few would be dedicated users. They would be people who actually love this game and who actually want to keep accessing these games. Because you agree with me that they would have gone, or it would take someone to have a level of passion to actually scale through all those orders to want to access Fortnite on iOS. Now, for these people and for those who actually have interest in actually accessing games like Fortnite, how do you think this battle currently affects them? Or how would it affect them?
Sure. So, I mean, it will affect them most if Epic win against Apple, and if they are iPhone users, like that would be the obvious answer. Because in that case, we would expect to see, like we mentioned earlier, like different stores popping up, and there are also potentially some reductions in price. So if you want your unicorn hammer or whatever item it is from Fortnite, they, I think off the back of this, would try to pass the saving of the 30% onto the consumer and not just pocket that difference. And that's what they did initially when, just before they got kicked off, when they had their own payment method running. They basically said, pay through Apple and you pay $10, pay through our own platform and you pay $8. So I think, reductions in price is definitely a possibility there. But that wouldn't apply to all companies. So there will be a lot of small and mid-sized companies who wouldn't be able to reduce their prices necessarily. They would see the extra 30% as a way of making their games better. So I think the main difference would probably just be about, again, like the monopoly of the store. So being able to create different stores, and I would imagine that there would be stores also created on a kind of geo basis. So there might be stores devoted to Africa as a continent or individual countries, in order to basically cater better for the needs of people there. Because, as you say, like storage can be an issue, like broadband, like internet, stable internet can be a real challenge as well. So I absolutely understand like the appeal that would be there if someone were to launch like a platform that basically offered kind of smaller download games, easier payment methods, and generally just kind of a more catered experience for specific audiences. I really think that would be the best possible outcome of this, but it does all depend on if Epic win against Apple. I think, keep in mind, like I said earlier, that Epic are also suing Google simultaneously. they're less likely to succeed on Google because you can do more stuff. It is possible to create stores. But I think, yeah, it would mostly affect Apple users, obviously, more than Google, just because, like I say, I don't think Google would actually lose that lawsuit.
All right, cool. So I like what you said. You said if Epic wins, so that means there's still a lot of probability that Epic is going to win this battle. So what do you see as a likely resolution? Because of course there has to be a resolution. Apple is saying that what Epic Game is practically doing is they are using the whole thing as a PR stunt for Fortnite. They're capitalizing on the conversation that they haven't been doing so fine in the past couple of months, and they are just using a lot of all these lawsuits and stuff as PR to market Fortnite, and they are also requesting telling Epic Games to come off it and just pay whatever needs to be paid and let them put them back on the platform. So what do you see as a likely resolution? Because of course the conversation already sounds like Apple doesn't want to stress this further, even though Epic Games sound like they still want to keep on this. So what do you see as a likely resolution from your own perspective and from the things you see?
So, I mean, I think it will carry on for a while. And like I talked about at the beginning, they need to be able to, like Apple needs to be able to prove two things within an antitrust lawsuit. Like one is the scale of the market, whether that's all mobile applications or whether it's just the App Store. And then they need to prove that they haven't done anything detrimental or like anti-consumer. So the US is still really focused on consumer welfare as like the main, I guess, the main focus of any antitrust lawsuit. So there needs to be an outcome which favors a consumer. And I think Apple will realistically win because I think they can justify that their platform provides sufficient value. They can argue that they provide this like safe space where you know that you're, I don't know, like if you can pay with credit card or whatever, that your data will be protected, that everything will be simple, that everything will be straightforward. And like they probably also have other like schemes to kind of fall back on. For example, there's 30% cut thing has been there for ages. Not once have they tried to really increase it, right? So even though they have the monopoly, they could say, oh, well, actually now you all owe us 50%. But they haven't tried to increase it. They've rather tried other things like subscription schemes where developers who were able to get users to subscribe for more than 1 year, in the second year, Apple's cut decreased to 15%. So I think they would argue that actually they are trying to still do stuff for developers, and that for the consumer they just provide this like better experience. And yeah, I don't think they will lose. Like if they do lose though, you can bet that Epic. If they do lose though, you can bet that Epic have a store ready to go.
Cool. Last question is, I think one of these for a resolution to happen is Apple needs to justify platform tax at 30%. That's what I think. And based on what you said earlier, platform tax started as 30% based on the fact that when people wanted to distribute their games across Nintendo games back in the 90s, Nintendo said 30%, and Apple through Steve Jobs are on to 30%. And of course, it's not just Apple. Google also holds on to 30%. Microsoft also on to 30%, and sort of become a standard. And like we said, it's just based on the fact that it started out with 30%. Do you think that Apple and these other platforms will be able to justify the 30%? And if they are able to justify, I think it will be reasonable. Because we practically don't have a justification for it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the marketplace, right? So I think if you look at the console stores as an example, for Sony, Microsoft, I think realistically they are more reliant on kind of game sales. They're more reliant on like promoting specific games at specific times. There's a lot less traffic, and generally there is, I would say, a lot less income than mobile games these days. So like for them to take 30%, I think probably actually is not as terrible. Like I think they actually need that amount in order to continue providing a sufficient level of service. And having been through release cycles with PlayStation and Xbox before, like I can vouch for the fact that they are very, very strong on the various standards that they set in order to make sure that your game qualifies. Like it has to conform a lot stronger than most mobile games do. So there is a lot more back and forth, meaning they need to hire people for that and they need to train them, etc. For Apple and Google, 30% is a lot, and 30% is a huge amount when you consider the revenue that certain games make. So if you think about the top grossing games at any given moment, whether that's Coin Master or Candy Crush or any of the kind of Clash Supercell games, just taking 30% for not really providing that much service is obviously wonderful for them, but I think it is too much.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nick. It has been a very interesting session, and you've shared a lot of insights with us. Some of the key things for me has been the fact that Apple have justification for what they are doing. Epic Games have also a lot of justification for what they are doing. And another key take home for me is you see this battle as more of a pro developer move than a pro consumer move, typically because consumers are less concerned about whatever happens. They just want to be able to discover the game and access it. So these are some of the key takeaways for me. You also talked about the fact that Apple needs to justify that they are not monopolizing distribution across their hardware, which of course is the iPhone to the iOS platform. And these are very interesting things as take home for me. I know a lot of people on this call, on this session have learned a lot of things. Because we asked for about 45 minutes of your time, and it's almost 7 o'clock. I think that it's right for me to round up the session right now. And if we have questions from any of the audience, they can of course reach out to us through Instagram DMs, or they can reach out to me via email or whatever channel available. So once again, Nick, thank you so much for honoring this invite. I know how busy you've been in the past couple of days, and I know that it really was out of love and interest for whatever is happening in the gaming scene on the continent. I decided to come up on this call. So thank you so much, Nick. Of course, I'll be on your DMs. Thank you once again for all the things you've done on this call.
Cool, my pleasure. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Bolu, for hosting. That was great.
All right, cheers, Nick. Bye.
See ya.
Bye. Yeah. All right, again, thank you so much for joining this call, guys. It's been a very interesting session with Nick. The video will be available on Instagram. It's going to be available on Facebook. It's going to be available on YouTube, so you can always come back and replay and enjoy everything we discussed on this call. I would also like to say regularly we do a couple of events, community events, gamers gaming like we are holding today, where we talk about everything gaming as really African context. And we also hold a skill up session where we equip our community members in relevant technology skills that they need to thrive. And we also hold our Talking Money and Opportunity session where we talk about money and opportunity relative to young Africans. So if you are not a member of the CarryFirst community, I would implore you to please join the CarryFirst community. You can go on Instagram right now and search for CarryFirst community and click the link on bio. Go on Instagram right now and search for CarryFirst community and click the link in bio. Thank you so much, guys. It's 7 o'clock already. Cheers, guys. Your questions, you can send them via email. You can send them via Instagram DM. My email is bulu@carryfirst.com. Definitely be forwarding your emails to Nick. I will be providing as much answers as we can. Thank you so much, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Yes, I'm on my, yeah, I'm on my, I am so.